This is a presentation of the Sports Source Digital Network, presented by Hearthside Bank.
Welcome into the Spring Football Show alongside VFL Ollie Lane. I'm Ryan Callahan of GoVols247.com, here to bring you some Tennessee football talk of another week of spring practice, another scrimmage in the books, and Tennessee getting ready for the spring-ending orange and white game on Saturday at Neyland Stadium. Before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to get all of the content from the Sports Source Digital Network sent to your feed, and be sure you can keep up to date with all of the episodes of this show and plenty of others throughout the Sports Source Digital Network. And thanks for watching us last week. And with that being said, Ollie, let's get right to it. Tennessee did have a scrimmage Monday at Neyland Stadium, Monday morning, second of the spring. We talked about the first scrimmage last week, and a week later back out there. And it's been an interesting scrimmage to kind of dissect because, as you know, with so many of these scrimmages, guys are out in the spring, so you're never at full strength. And then not every scrimmage has as many splashy plays or things to get excited about. And I think the overall consensus coming out of this one is kind of just a meh scrimmage, like nothing a whole lot, not a whole lot to get excited about on either side of the ball. But it does sound like after the offense had a better performance in the first scrimmage, that the defense, things kind of swung back toward the defense in this one, and especially the defensive starters had a good day overall. Is there anything we can take away from that in the big picture, that the defense, even with some guys missing, had a good day with the starters out there, and that the offense maybe either took a step back or had a few more bumps in the road?
Yeah, well, and I've said it on here before, scrimmages aren't always the best picture, especially offensively, of how it's really going to look out, because you're not always going to get the looks that you want, not always going to get the matchups that you want. However, I think it says a lot that the defense, especially the defensive starters, came out and had a really good day, kind of bounced back a little bit from the first scrimmage. I'm sure that was partly coaching challenge on them, really bring it into the scrimmage, and it seems like they did a really good job of that. The fact is, you look at a scrimmage one way or the other, you're either thinking, what's wrong with my offense or what's wrong with my defense, if one does better than the other. So I think you probably layer a little bit of concern, as this is the second scrimmage. You wanted to see more things got cleaned up. That didn't sound like they got really cleaned as far as pre-snap issues on both sides of the ball. That is something that might be a little glaring. But, the great thing about spring is, we've got a little bit of an injury plague going on. We got some stuff going on. The fact is, you got time. You're not working towards anything at the moment. And in saying that, you're not working towards a game. Like, there's not an actual game at the end of this week that we're playing against somebody else. It's just the orange and white game. You've got a whole summer and a fall left to prepare. What's good about these scrimmages and spring practice as a whole is you just get more information. You get stuff to look at in the summer and be like, well, we tried this in the spring, it didn't work, or we tried this in the spring, it worked really well. We want to keep working and developing this. And then the fact is, you look at where you're at now, and you got to factor in the injuries, and these guys are going to be back by the time we really start getting serious about this season, and we're going to be okay. Yep. But I've gotten a lot of good development for these younger guys, and that's really what the spring is. Most importantly, I think, what you're getting out of is you're getting time and development for these younger guys that don't always get the attention when it comes around season time. And that's what I think is the most valuable thing that they've gotten out of this spring for sure, is just figuring out, all right, who is our depth chart now? Who is the roster, and how do we fill this thing out? Where do we identify who we need to work on as we start progressing into a football season? And
speaking of which, we'll get into some depth chart talk a little bit later at one position in particular. But going back to the scrimmage, one guy that did stand out, and I wouldn't say there were a ton of just obvious standouts in this one, but one guy who did make a big play, Ethan Davis, at tight end, caught a touchdown. It may have been in situational work. We don't know all the details on everything, but did catch a touchdown pass from Jake Merklinger, the redshirt freshman quarterback, who maybe not today specific, or maybe not Monday specifically, but this spring in general, I think has had shown some really nice progress. And so I think that's, he'd be one of the spring standouts if you were just picking overall spring award winners that they do or have done in the past. I think you'd probably have to single him out as one of the guys that's stood out. But on this day in particular, Ethan Davis catching a touchdown pass, not a bad development considering they really need him to step forward with Miles Kitselman hurt right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they need him to start filling in that role, because now you're looking at him starting the season. He might be your number one tight end going into it. And it's great to hear the news of him catch a touchdown, doing all this. It's great stuff. I mean, I've never worried about Ethan Davis' athletic ability and route running ability. His ability to be a receiver at that tight end position is exactly where it needs to be. He's really good at that. What I want to hear more of is, how's his blocking coming? And I understand, offensive lineman, I'm looking at the blocking. Yeah, I want to know, how has his blocking progressed? Where is he moving forward on being able to move some of these bigger guys out of here? Because the fact is, at tight end, you're also, yes, you block some smaller guys out in space, but there's also going to be a lot of times and opportunities where you're having to help tackles or even replace a tackle in a pool and blocking a bigger defensive lineman type body. So I want to hear how that's progressing. Again, I'm not concerned about his athletic ability. His athletic ability is by far perfect for what the tight end position calls for. But as they continue to rely on him more and more as the season slowly approaches with Miles Kitselman out, I want to hear more about how his blocking is developing throughout the rest of the summer.
And worth noting that Alec Ablin, tight ends coach, did speak with us on Saturday going into that scrimmage. He complimented Ethan Davis for his consistency this spring, so it does sound like things are moving in the right direction. We also heard a little bit of that last year. I think we've heard it a little more consistently, though, this offseason, so I think there's legitimate reason for optimism in that regard. One of the guys who was not out there, unfortunately, for Tennessee in this scrimmage was Braylon Staley. Very likely one of Tennessee's starting wide receivers, redshirt freshman. Didn't get to play a lot last year, but a former top 100 prospect they're pretty excited about. Playing in the slot mostly, and he was not out there for this scrimmage. Has been kind of banged up since that first scrimmage more than a week ago. So we don't know exactly what his availability might be for the orange and white game on Saturday. So keep that in mind if you're looking for kind of a status check on where the receiver play is. They're a little limited there in numbers to begin with, and then potentially not having Braylon Staley or maybe at less than 100%. But a little bit of a disappointing development there that he didn't get out there for this scrimmage, especially because with Amari Jefferson still working back, the Alabama transfer from the hip surgery he had back in the fall, not a lot of depth at all at receiver. So 4 scholarship receivers were out there for this scrimmage. That's got to be a bit of a setback for the offense when you hear that maybe the offense didn't have a really great day. I think you start with the fact there were 4 scholarship receivers out there. Exactly.
And I mean, it's a bad place to start from when you're wanting to work on something in the spring and get looks at stuff and you don't have the guys that are going to be running it out there. However, at the end of the day, it is spring. So if he is banged up, there's no reason for him to scrimmage. Let him take some time to get his body right and back to perfect so he's ready to go as summer and fall progresses. So I understand that to a point of holding him out. If it was some serious concern with him being banged up. I mean, the fact of the matter is, yes, you get a lot out of spring, but it's not worth risking a season-ending injury to happen in spring practice. So, I mean, it's okay to step out a little bit. Obviously, as a fan base and as people wanting to see this team, we want to see the full potential of it already. However, fans, I think at some point need to lower the expectations of what they're going to see in this orange and white game from the receiver corps just because, like you said, there's 4 of them that were out there for this last scrimmage that are on scholarship. So it's hard to tell who's going to be out there. I think there's going to even be more additions this summer come to that wide receiver room. So, yes, you can take some of the information that you get from it, but at the same time, understand the full scope of what that room is and that they're still building it as the fall starts to roll around.
And another guy that was out there, and it sounds like may have gotten, from what I understand, I haven't heard this from a lot of places, but it sounds like he might have been out there first at the running back position in this scrimmage. Peyton Lewis, I think, has continued to perform well this spring. He looks a little slimmed down to me this spring and has looked pretty good, and it's been kind of a 1A, 1B situation, I think, with he and Deshaun Bishop. I still feel like Bishop might be the first guy out there this fall when we get to game 1. But regardless, the fact that we're hearing good things about Peyton Lewis, because Josh Heupel did have some positive things to say about him after the scrimmage. The fact that, former 4-star prospect out of Virginia, getting a little bit of buzz this spring, I think that's a good sign for Tennessee with obviously having some big shoes to fill in Dylan Sampson at the running back position.
No, exactly. I mean, you've got a large amount of production that you're going to have to make up for Dylan Sampson. And so having a guy like this show out the way he is in the spring is something huge. I heard a lot of talk back when he came on campus last year of how talented he is and how great he's going to be. And it's good to see that finally come into fruition and being an actual realistic goal for us. The fact is, I think we've narrowed it down now. Bishop and Lewis are going to be our 1 and 2, interchangeable. So now it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of that depth chart falls out. Is it going to be Morris or is it going to be Star Thomas that takes over that 3 spot and kind of make it a 3-man rotation? Because I think that's what works best for this running back room. Because, I mean, especially with how much we want to put an emphasis on running the ball, you want to be able to have fresh legs in there every time. But, I mean, then it also makes you think of, was Morris ready as terms of pass protection-wise? Is he going to be able to come up there and match up with some of the best linebackers in the country on blitzes and stuff like that? And Star Thomas, for the most part, he's experienced it. He knows what it takes to be a D1 running back, both running the ball and protection. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops, but it gives me really good faith that our running back room is just fine and that we're not going to see a miss from having such great production the year before to this year, I think it's just going to be the same amount of production, if not more.
Yeah, I think you have to feel pretty good about the running back position, all things considered, with all the other question marks Tennessee has on offense. One guy on defense that I have heard some good things about is Edwin Spillman, the redshirt freshman linebacker. Didn't get to play a lot last year because of some injury problems, but came back at the end of the year, played a lot in the Ohio State game in the college football playoff. I think there's a lot of excitement about him in and around the program, and we'll talk about the linebacker depth chart here in just a minute, but he's a guy that I think is going to factor in pretty heavily to Tennessee's plans at that position. So to hear that it sounds like he moved into the starting lineup with the first-team defense after Ben Bolton, the walk-on, had been working with alongside Jeremiah Thielander for a lot of the spring. So clearly they're bringing him along and putting more and more faith in him, and this is a guy that I think has a chance to play a lot of football for Tennessee the next few years.
Yeah, and it's a good thing in the spring to put that pressure on him, put him in there with the ones, let him see what he can do against what we consider our best to be. That gives you, I think, a really clear picture on what this guy's really going to be able to do. He obviously played a lot in the Ohio State game, looked decent in that game. Want to continue to see him progress and make it to where he's going to be a consistent starter. I mean, the fact is you got Arion Carter still in the mix. And so you got to figure out where all these pieces are going to fall in as fall comes around. But having a guy like this make a name for himself this spring really solidifies his chances of seeing a lot of playing time this year.
No question. And we want to real quickly touch on also the offensive line. We got to put all three position groups up here. Tennessee does have some wide open competitions across the offensive line. It's worth noting they've been moving some guys around a little bit. Sam Pendleton can play multiple spots. Larry Johnson's still working at right tackle with the ones, while David Sanders works his way up the depth chart and kind of earns his way. That's a guy that we think will very likely be in the starting lineup or has a good chance of doing that by the time the season rolls around. But in the meantime, it sounds like on this day, the defensive line, at least with the starters out there, might have gotten the better of them, at least in pass protection situations. But decent run blocking, it sounds like, on this day. Overall, when you hear that, what does that make you think about where this offensive line is right now?
Yeah, I mean, they're progressing. The fact is it's not going to be perfect. They are replacing much more than they've had to replace in the past with having to replace 4 of the starting offensive linemen. So it is a task that they've been able to take on. The words that I did hear that I liked is competitive. They're competitive in that room. There's competitiveness in who's going to take the position. So it allows me to know that it's a wide open chase for that spot. They're allowing everybody to really put in what they want, and they're going to get what they put into it. And so that's good to see. As far as the scrimmage details go, I mean, yeah, it's good that we're moving the ball, moving people off the ball and running it well. The pass protection stuff does concern me to a point because a lot of the pass protection stuff of picking up things is just communication. And communication builds off chemistry, and how much have you gotten to play with each other really kind of helps figure those things out. I mean, when you're passing off a twist, it's a lot better to know the guy so you know how he's going to pass it off so you can adjust how you're doing it or vice versa. And so, I mean, the more input, more communication that you have, and that's just going to come with time. And that's the thing. These guys don't have time together that they've been able to build up throughout the year. So that's why I think coming from this orange and white game, you really need to know who at least your 7 are. The 7 are that you're going to really play with, 7 or 8, and then really start developing that communication, that chemistry with them so it becomes much more smoother. Because I think that's probably where a lot of those pass protection issues arise, because I've seen it happen in the past. If you throw 2 guys out there that haven't really played together, there's going to be some miscommunication happen along the line that's going to create a sack or a bust or a pressure.
Yep.
So.
And yeah, definitely worth noting that that offensive line will have some competition that goes into the summer. So I don't think you'll have anything settled, but guys like Jesse Perry, Sham Umarov, I think you've had some nice depth develop across the offensive line this spring. So pretty encouraging situation overall. Just got to kind of figure out who that starting lineup is. Let's get into some depth chart talk. As I mentioned, we want to talk about the linebackers. You got the middle and the Mike and Will, or middle and weak side linebacker positions that are the main spots in this defense. And obviously we'll start with the guy that's been not out there this spring, except just kind of working off to the side, Arion Carter. I think they feel pretty good about him and what he brings to this defense. Also worth noting, these guys are kind of interchangeable. You got Arion Carter and Jeremiah Thielander that I think can both play the Mike position, can both play Will, but I think Carter being kind of that leader of the group in a lot of ways, maybe the front runner to be the Mike, but we'll see how they handle that. They can kind of pass that green dot around for the helmet communication and handle that as needed. But you've got to feel pretty good about those 2 guys. The question marks for this group go behind there, and that's where you've got Edwin Spillman right now, I would say challenging to be a starter, but still behind Jeremiah Thielander. Obviously a big edge for experience with Thielander there. But these 3 are the ones I think you're going to see out there the most. It's going to be a pretty heavy rotation, I think, behind these guys maybe for whatever snaps are left. But these three, I think, are going to almost be seen as kind of co-starters. And then beyond that group, it's really hard to say what the exact pecking order is. We're going to throw Brendan Ains, a true freshman who is out there right now, in with the twos for now, simply because he's out there, and that we have heard some good things about him. William Inge, the linebackers coach, and some of his teammates all have kind of had some good things to say about what Brendan Ains has shown. I think he's been maybe a pleasant surprise in his first months in the program, so that's, I think, an encouraging development. On the flip side, you've had a couple freshmen that are really talented guys in Jaden Perlotti and Jaden Harmon who have not been out there this spring, and that's not ideal that those guys haven't been out there, but I think there's still some excitement about them. And then I would say right with those guys, I would kind of view these as co-number threes. Jordan Burns, he's still learning. I think he's shown some flashes this spring, but before he can earn a spot in the two deep, I think he's going to have to show a little more on the mental side of the game. So as you look at this picture as a whole, what your thoughts on this group? You've got some solid starters there and at least a capable third that everybody's excited about in Spillman.
Yeah, I mean, definitely you're missing out on not having Arion out there this spring, but I think in the end it's going to benefit you because it's forcing T-Laner to take up more of that leadership role. Because I think it was just kind of falling on Arion that he was going to be the leader of that linebacker group, and I think he still is, but now it forces T-Laner to kind of come out of his comfort zone a little bit, be more vocal, more understanding, and communicate as a leader to the rest of the group. And then, you know, how everything else is filling out, it's very interesting to see a bunch of these young guys getting these opportunities that they have. You know, part of that is just, one, learning the entire scheme of what you're trying to accomplish, but being able to learn that and then put it into action on the field is something that's huge. And I mean, seeing Ains being able to kind of make some strides and make flashes of what he could possibly do, it's really exciting. Now, I mean, we're going to have to see how the rest of the group kind of formulates and falls out into things. Because, I mean, the fact is, you stick with a certain core of your linebackers. You don't rotate them a ton, but there is rotation in there. There's going to need to be some guys that have to come in and take up some snaps from time to time. So you want to be able to trust those guys because your linebackers are really the captain of the defense. They help kind of put everything kind of going in the right direction. And so it's important to have two guys out there that you trust. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
And this fall in particular, I'll be watching this guy, specifically Jaden Harmon. A lot of excitement about him internally, but just, again, haven't gotten a chance to see him out there on the field this spring. With that being said, gearing up for the orange and white game on Saturday, 2 o'clock at Neyland Stadium. Will not be televised, so you'll have to go see it in person. And we'll, of course, be back here next week with our final episode of the Spring Football Show to recap it all and break down everything we saw. So for Ollie Lane, I'm Ryan Callahan. We'll see you right here next week on the Sports Source Digital Network.